So now the question becomes, why was Socrates so willing to die? And this is the big takeaway from this whole talk. All of these days leading up to this. In short, remember, Socrates is trying to answer this question. How do you know what you know? How do you know what you know? And he acknowledged that there are things that you know that you shouldn't know. Like you know what infinity is, but you've never experienced it before. How could you possibly know what it is? There's love. If you've never experienced it before, you wouldn't know what it was. And if you didn't know what it was, you wouldn't know when you found it. So you would never know that you were in love, and we wouldn't even have a word for it. You've never been taught what justice is. There's all perfection. There's all kinds of things that we should not know, but we do know. And this is why I'm saying it's important, epistemology is important, to know how we know what we know. And here's how deep it is for him. This is called the theory of the forms. And if you only remember one thing I teach you this whole section, I hope it's this. Socrates argues that the only way that you can know things that you've never experienced before is if you've experienced them before. Say that again. The only way that you can know things you've never experienced before is if you've experienced them before. So he argues that before you were born, you were a soul, a spirit, that was running around out in the cosmos, which he called the realm of the intellectual realm. It's kind of like a physical world, but it's non-physical. It's mental, it's spiritual. And that's what your nature is. And while you were out there, you encountered things. Like, for example, you encountered a chair. A chair. And specifically, you encountered the ideal chair. The perfect version of a chair. You encountered the idea of justice. The form of justice. So you learned specifically what justice was. You learned what infinity was because you were living in it. This is an eternal world. Because it's not physical, you never die there. Only physical things fall apart. Only physical things degenerate. So out here is a world where nothing degenerates. This is eternal. This is infinity. You learned what perfection was. You learned what things like beauty are. That's how we know what beauty is. And again, this includes also physical things, like chairs, cars, cats, whatever. In other words, you interacted with the perfect version of all of these things. And then one day, as you're out there screaming around the universe, and by the way, sorry, this means that you know everything. This means you already know everything. Okay? And then one day, your mom and dad just had to hook up. Ruin things for you. And they had a baby, and when that happens, as you're running around the cosmos, this is great, we can't go. Your soul gets pulled out from this realm over here, and it gets sucked down into the physical realm, which is what we call reality. This is what we call life, Earth. It's this thing that you're experiencing right now. You ever see a newborn? And it comes out, it's like, what the hell just happened to me? That's because a second ago it was here. All of a sudden it encounters this horrible transition. And the act of being born is so traumatic that you have completely forgotten all of this stuff. So therefore, what's the teacher's job? Not to tell you what these things are, but to ask you the proper combination of questions to unlock what you already know. So you're born, these people are holding you, you're looking over in the corner and you see this weird thing. I mean, it kind of looks like a chair, but it's not, it's an imitation. It's a degenerate imitation of the real thing. So that means that somebody, at some point, was reminded about what a chair was, and then tried to make a chair based off of this perfect model. It's kind of like if you have like a marker here, and you decide you want to draw the marker, so you draw it. Is it ever the same? No, it looks different. It might be functional, but this is the perfect version. Similarly, if you want to trace something, if something's been traced, it looks different from the original. Somehow, some way, we look at it and we're like, it's not terrible, it's not tyranny, but it's also not aristocracy. It's not a terrible tracing job, but it's not the original. The original, the real thing, is the thing that we want. Everything on this planet is an imitation of the perfect version that you find down here. You don't find perfect beauty. What you find is some kind of approximation of beauty. And some things, of course, get closer to real beauty than others, but that's the perfect version of it. And the more it resembles this, the closer it is to that, the more we love it, because our soul recognizes it. We don't recognize it with our eyes, our five senses. Instead, we connect with it at a spiritual level, at a soul level. Have you ever encountered a person, and you've just met them, but somehow, some way you feel like you've known them your whole life, or you have a really close connection with them? You probably did know them before, because they were out here with you, running around in the cosmos. And then that person gets born, and you guys shared a bunch of experiences up there. You know this person. And then when that person is born, maybe 15 years into your life, 20 years into your life, 30 years into your life, you meet them, and you're like, man, that's so weird that I feel like I've known you my whole life. Have you ever heard a song before, and you have a deep connection to that song, and you've only heard it like once or twice in your life, but somehow, some way it strikes you? I remember one time I gave a friend of mine a ride home, and I dropped her off. And this is when I was living in Los Angeles. I specifically remember where I was. I was backing out of her driveway, and I heard this song come on, and it was by a band called James. And the song is just gorgeous. And I remember as I'm driving away going like, man, I haven't heard this song in forever. And I turned up the radio really loud, and it's a short song. And I remember thinking as the song was going on, man, I wish this song was longer. And then finally it ends, and I'm like, oh man. And then the DJ comes on the radio. It's a guy named Richard Blade, and he has a British accent. And Richard Blade says, oh, that's the world premiere of the new song from James. The world premiere? How could that have been the world premiere? I know that song. I've heard it before. I could hum along with it, everything. There are things in your life that you're going to be oddly familiar with, and you're not going to know why you're familiar with them. It's because you encountered them before in their spiritual form. This is why this person who you might have a deep connection to, let's call it what it is, man. They might be a piece of trash. And everybody tells you they're a piece of trash. But you look at them and you say, no, you don't know them the way I know them. That's because you're not thinking of them as they are right here. You're thinking of them as they are up here, the perfect version of them. That's the version you know. That's the version that you want them to be. Because that's our aim in life. Our aim in life is to get as close as possible to that perfect ideal of beauty. By the way, this is why it's called idealism. Because we're looking at the ideal forms of these things. You want to get as close as you possibly can to the ideal form of beauty. The ideal form of perfection, justice. In other words, you want to be as close as possible to this ideal version of you. And that's our goal in life. That's what it is to be a good person. To be as close as possible to that. And you see this person who's down here, and something's happened to them in life, man, they're stumbling for some reason. There's some things that happened to them that have caused them to lose sight of who they are. And you see this version in this person down here. As bad as this person is. And what that also means is that every single person you come across is just a bad imitation of who they really are up here. It's not their soul that's corrupted. It's something about this world that corrupts us. Everything down here degenerates. Everything down here dies. And that's an ugly thing. But there's something beautiful about perfection and infinity. And that's your nature. I wonder if you've ever been walking around before in this world and just felt like I don't belong here. I just don't belong here. Maybe in your community, maybe in your world, maybe in your family, maybe in your classroom, maybe even in your own skin. You just feel like a stranger in some sort of a strange land. Or maybe you just feel like your soul is being pulled someplace else, and you really feel like you have someplace else that you need to be. Both of those are true, because you're not of this world. You're not of this world. You're not the car that drives down the street. Your car is your body. You're the person who drives that car. The beautiful thing is that when you crash that car, you get out of it, and you walk away. When this body dies and this world ends, you're going to get out of this body, and you're going to go back to where you belong. You can go back to your home, where you're perfect, where you're eternal. And you get to interact with the perfect version of all these people. So when Socrates is sentenced to death, he goes into the death chamber, and he's surrounded by his students. He's surrounded by his wife and her friends, and he takes that one opportunity to just be a real asshole to his wife, and kicks her out because her and her friends are crying. And he said, "Get out of here! You're bringing me down." So he takes that one last opportunity to be a terrible husband. And his students are there, and they're very sad, and he tells them, "Listen, if you guys can't cheer up, you need to go also." And the executioner comes in, and he's got the hemlock, and hemlock is poison. So he's sentenced to die by mixing with poison, and then giving it and then drinking the poison. So the executioner comes in, he mixes it. Oh, probably doesn't use his finger. Probably used a stirrer, and then gave it to Socrates and goes, "Here you go." So Socrates takes the hemlock and goes, "How do I do this? I've never done this before." So they execute. I love that. The guy's about to die and he's still got jokes. And the executioner says, "You drink the hemlock and then you walk around. Because if you walk around, it'll go through your blood faster and it'll take effect faster. So you'll die faster if you walk around." So Socrates says, "Okay," takes the hemlock, gets some more of the poison, because he's jazzed about this. And his students, when he drinks of the poison, that's when they start to cry. He says, "Dude, if you guys can't stop crying, get out of here." "Okay, we're sorry, teacher." And so he gets up and he starts walking around, and he starts talking about the nature of the soul. And the executioner tells him, at some point, your legs are going to go cold. And so as he's walking, his legs do go cold. And then he's told his legs will go numb, and they start going numb. And he's told that when that happens, the poison is working its way up his body, and soon it will be in his heart, and it'll stop his heart, and then he'll die. So as that poison passes through his legs, he can no longer stand. His students put him on the bed, on the table, and he lays there, and he waits for the poison as he feels it approaching. And just before that poison reaches his heart, he turns to one of his students, and says, "We owe a rooster to Asclepius. Make sure the debt's paid." And his student says, "The debt will be paid, master." And he dies. Sometimes we look at that story and we think, Socrates, wow, he must have been such a moral man. The only debt he owed was a rooster to somebody. And he wanted to make sure that his debt was paid so that he would be completely a moral person. That's not what it means. Asclepius wasn't a person. Asclepius was the Greek god of medicine. Interesting. He's just been convicted of impiety, and yet his last words are to pay a debt back to the god of medicine. Why? Because the god of medicine, because he sees that this life is a disease. This physical body is a disease. And that the medicine for this disease is death. And the thing that takes you back to this life up here. You're going to notice that Socrates is 70 years old. He doesn't go jumping off of buildings. It isn't like, "Oh, I want to get back to the spiritual world," and jumping off of a cliff somewhere. He understands that while we're down here for a reason. And you've got plenty of time to get up there. And there are things to learn from this world. So don't be in such a rush to get to this world. You'll get there eventually. Yes, you belong there and you'll get there. But there's things to do down here that reflect this thing. The things that you do down here, though, they should reflect who you really are. Too often we live in a way that degrades us. We lie, we cheat, we steal. We do horrible things to each other. We spread rumors, we trash talk each other. We do all this horrible stuff. You're bringing down a perfect soul when you do that. When you're spreading rumors about someone, when you're trying to destroy, yeah, but they're trying to destroy me. Who cares? Is that who you are? Is it the right thing to tear people down? If I ask you, are you a good person? Most people say, oh, I'm a good person. And then you can always ask the follow-up just by asking a little bit skeptically. You're a good person? Well, I mean, I'm nice to people who are nice to me. Well, then you're not a good person. You're a credit card. You give a little bit, you take a little bit. In other words, you are defined by how people around you behave. You're like a tennis ball getting hit back and forth. If you're a good person, then you be a good person. Well, what if they're being jerks? Who cares about them? Well, then, because if I'm good to them, they're going to take advantage of me, and I'm going to look stupid. Oh, pride, ego. Those are your weaknesses. Pride and ego are stopping you from being the thing that you really are. Pride and ego in what? In this physical, corruptible thing that's going to go away soon? Stop putting our time and energy into the things that are passing away. Instead, put our time and energy into becoming who we are, the perfect version that's eternal. Don't be afraid of the things that destroy you down here. Be worried about the things that corrupt you when you're up there, because that's what you have to live with for the rest of your life. And that should reflect who you are. We should eliminate the things in our lives that don't reflect who we really are, the things that are least worthy to represent us. This is what he's saying. And I get it. Pride, ego, we just can't stand the fact that some people will be mean to us. That's on them, man. That's their punishment. And your pride and ego, name me something good that's ever manifested in the world because of pride, because of ego. All that comes from those things are destruction, and it's usually self-destruction. Nothing good comes from that. Who cares what the world does? Who cares what the world says? Who cares what these things? I know I get it, but I care. That's the problem. You care because you're caring about the things of the world, not the things that are really you. And that's why you feel so displaced. That's why these things bother you so much, because you're not focused here. Remember we talked about with William Yates, as he's passing in the mountain overhead, he hides his face amid a crowd of stars. And if he's staring up at the stars, what is he not looking at? The girl below him. The problem with Yates is that he's distracted. He keeps looking at the girl below him because he's wondering if she's talking about him, if she still loves him. No, forget that. He keeps his face amid the crowd of stars, but he's always going back. You cannot live life like this. And if you want me to prove it, here's your homework for the weekend. I'll leave you with this. Go home. Get in a runner stance. Now I want you to look behind you and then run as fast as you can forward through your house. Don't look forward, only look backwards. How's that going to go for you? Because you can't run forward if you're always looking backwards. Stop looking down. Keep your eyes focused upward. Questions, comments, concerns, complaints, criticisms, critiques?